I grew up learning that one of my jobs as your husband is to never have you doubt for a second how much I love you and how important you are to our family. At my father's funeral, we gathered the 5 boys, and one of the questions was, "What's the greatest lesson dad taught you?" And, we went around, it was like, "Oh, to be a good storyteller," wrote it, "Look at the brighter side of life," or whatever. My brother Kim, the middle brother, he said, I think the greatest lesson dad taught us was how to love your wife." And we all kinda looked at him and went, "Yeah, okay, you win." When you have 5 boys, it's always a competition no matter what it is, right? And, um, and I've reflected on that, and he did, he always held the door for my mom. He always was so complimentary. He never raised his voice, and my relationships can be difficult, and I'm sure they had difficult times. Never took offense. He never for a minute, I've had this conversation with my lovely wife, Heidi. We'll be married 43 years this year. My parents were 65, so set a goal, 65 is sort of the minimum, right? Um, I'll tell her, I said, I grew up learning that one of my jobs as your husband is to never have you doubt for a second how much I love you and how important you are to our family. And she goes, "Yeah, I really appreciate that." I said, "Yeah, it's good." So that loving environment, I think, is another great lesson from just growing up in a happy household. You know, I will tell you a cute story because being the youngest, and there's 5 years between my brother and I. So for 4 or 5 years, I had my parents all to myself, which was unique in the brothers, right? And being a teenager, and I don't even remember what it was, but I got kinda snarky with my mom, and I said something in a little bit of a raised voice and a little unkind, and my dad was home. And I remember him coming out of the bedroom, and we had this lovely house in West Van. You could enter, in the front door, but you could enter in the back because it was on the side of a mountain, right? Beautiful views. Vancouver's spectacularly beautiful. Anyway, I was a little snarky with my mom, and I'm at the top of the stairs gonna head down to my bedroom. And my dad comes out, and I went, "Oh, this isn't gonna be good." And he puts his arm around me, and he says, "Chess, you know how much I love you?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "And you know how much I love your mom?" I go, "Yeah." And he says, "If I ever hear you speak to her like that again, I will knock out all your teeth and throw you headfirst down those stairs." Now, this is a different era. Like, you'd say, "Oh, well, that's abuse or anything." But, back in the, 70s, that was that was how you grew up, right? It could be violent. And I remember looking at him saying, "Yeah." And he said, "So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go into the kitchen right now, and you're gonna apologize to your mom. Are we clear?" I went, "Crystal clear, Dad." Let me go do that right now, you know? And he did it in this sort of loving, terrifying way that there was no doubt. I had no doubt how much he loved me. I had no doubt how much he loved my mom, and I had no doubt that he would absolutely throw me headfirst down those stairs, you know? And that was, putting things back in place.